Hello, everyone. I'm Brandon Hawker with the Open Minds Market Intelligence team, and I would like to welcome all of you to today's Circle Elite Executive Roundtable, Value-Based Readiness, Cornerstone's Acquisition Strategy for VBR Success. Today's roundtable features Karen Carloni, the Executive Director of Southern Maryland Community Network Incorporated. One brief note, Carrie Guthrie, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Cornerstone Montgomery, will be unable to join us today. Karen Carloni serves as the Executive Director of Southern Maryland Community Network Incorporated, a 501c3 nonprofit community behavioral health organization. Since assuming the position in May 2013, Ms. Carloni has focused on working with the community stakeholders to address service gaps over a 3-county region. Ms. Carloni believes in building strong partnerships among service participants, other area providers, government and private entities in order to achieve the agency mission. She specializes in program development and bringing value through achieving impact. Ms. Carloni has previous experience as a deputy director, rehabilitation director, and private practice therapist. She also writes for Choosing Therapy and serves as an officer on the board of directors of the Community Behavioral Health Association. Ms. Carloni is a treasurer of the Maryland Behavioral Health Services Provider Network, and in 2015, Ms. Carloni completed the Executive Leadership Program of the National Council on Leadership Southern Maryland in 2017. Ms. Carloni completed a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology at the University of Florida and a Master's of Art in Counselor Education at the University of South Florida. She holds CRC and LCPC licenses and is a nationally certified counselor. Ms. Carloni is married with 4 children and several adult foster children. Moderating today's roundtable will be Carol Duncan Clayton, Senior Associate, Open Minds. Dr. Carol Clayton is a licensed psychologist with 30 years of healthcare experience in the field, public and private sectors, including nonprofit and private practice work. Prior to joining Open Minds as a senior consultant, she retired as a translational neuroscientist for Elias, where she specialized in healthcare solutions, targeting workforce development and population health outcome improvement. Before joining Relias, Dr. Clayton was the CEO of Care Management Technologies, a health IT data analytics company. She also served as the executive director of the NC Council of Community Programs from 2000 to 2006. The NC Council is a predecessor organization to I2I. Before we get started, a few housekeeping reminders. As always, your audio will be muted during today's briefing. However, we encourage you to submit any and all questions you may have using the question box located on the right side of your screen. We will present audience questions at the end. Finally, the slides and recording from today's briefing will be available on the Open Minds website by tomorrow. Okay, Carol, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Brandon, and thank you, Karen. It's a pleasure to be joined with you, and no surprise, really, in terms of, Carrie's inability to join us, given the topic of today. We are here to talk about, the title is called Cornerstone's Acquisition Strategy for Value-Based Reimbursement Success, but I would say I'd like to reframe it and say that's Cornerstone and Southern Maryland's business strategy for how to position 2 organizations for leveraging each other's talents and really increasing business stability, business opportunity, including value-based readiness. So I know that, Karen, you are fast approaching your go live date of January 1. And so given that, as we know, shift happens. And so here we are on December 8th, and Carrie has got to attend to something that has some urgency towards your date. So for the audience members, we will carry on, and Carrie is here in spirit with us. And Karen, I know you'll represent really both perspectives here, not only Southern Maryland's, and we will talk a little bit about the concept of acquisition versus merger in the course of today, but certainly Cornerstone is acquiring Southern Maryland in this scenario, and so you each are coming at it from your own competitive advantage and also looking for the strength in the other party, and we'll be able to talk some about that. Let me go to my next slide here, and these are the objectives that we hope to cover today. We'll have plenty of time for questions, or we hope so, at the end of our hour. So please utilize the chat. Brandon and Karen will be taking a look at that, and we hope to be able to have some dialogue with those of you in the audience around our topics for today. We do want to look at factors influencing, as I said, this decision, particularly Cornerstone's decision to move forward with an acquisition. We'll hear from Karen about that as well in terms of her decision factors and her board's decision factors in terms of being acquired. The process of implementation, some successes and tips for handling events throughout. We've been very active together. I've been able to support these two entities in their work through implementation. Karen will speak to those, and certainly what are the goals and outcomes that both parties hope to achieve, including being able to be ready for value-based reimbursement. And Karen will talk more about the agencies. They are located in Maryland, and so there is, as with every state, some unique components in history to Maryland public sector mental health, including Medicaid, and how that might influence not only their decisions, but how they move forward. So those are our objectives for today. Let me go to the next slide here. And I'm going to provide you some background. And if you might have this information in front of you, but if you don't, I certainly wanted you to have this information in front of you in terms of timely topic around acquisitions, mergers, and affiliations, particularly in the behavioral health space. 2022 has only been exceeded by one prior year, which was 2020, as the most activity in our behavioral health space regarding mergers, acquisitions, and affiliations. The link to this data is here in this slide, and as Brandon said, you will receive this deck later. But there have been 151 behavioral health transactions in 2022. Again, only topped by 2020, and you can imagine why, for many reasons. Certainly the impact of the pandemic in many ways, not only in terms of just stability in general for agencies, but also just the interest in the investor community and the amount of capital that was available to invest in behavioral health as we became aware across our country in the enormous impact of behavioral health, behaviors, substance use disorder on overall health and outcome, and particularly total cost of care. There began to be a sort of an urgency, insurgency around having components of behavioral health within the larger systems. So lots of activity to date. It is no surprise that people are looking for partners, talking about partners. You can see this year, 33% of the deals that have occurred in merger and acquisition have been in the IDD space, 14% in mental health, and a little less in substance use disorder. And most of these have been private equity. So unlike Cornerstone and Southern Maryland coming together as two nonprofit entities, about a third of the activity this year has been similar to their path. 2/3 of it has been in private for-profit investors. And that also has some impact if you are participating, thinking about exploring either acquiring a company, merging with a company, affiliating, understanding competitively what is happening around you in terms of that space with private investment is really an important piece of financial information for you in terms of any urgency of decision making you might need to have. And as I said, really, no surprise, this has been brewing for about 10 years. So let's hit on some of these. Karen will put, I'm going to say the exclamation point on these. Why would you, if you're a nonprofit entity, why would you be thinking about pursuing a partnership, an affiliation, or other type of business combination? Well, obviously, economies of scale, and I'll have you a checklist here in a second about things that you can look at as red flags within your organization, that if you are not able to do certain pieces, your economy of scale just might not be big enough to survive in the long run, and getting bigger helps you reduce those costs per unit. Looking to either expand your service lines, bringing your best-in-class services with someone else's best-in-class services that might be not only different service, but perhaps different disability. Looking to expand your geographic reach, which you will hear from Karen as a part of their key business strategy. Opportunity to emerge and rebrand as a new organization. being able to enhance your a collaboration in terms of population health or other kinds of contracting, whether it be with other health systems, increasing your talent pool, and increasing just your bandwidth to engage in innovation, getting beyond just what I call your normal have-to business, and having some leverage within either your capital funds or within your talent pool to focus and iterate on learning and something new. Certainly being able to scale your technology and increase your revenue streams sort of goes, I think, without being said in terms of the other boxes. So as you're thinking about this and also thinking about your readiness for value-based arrangement, these are the kinds of things that you have to look at internally. If you are hitting up against that you simply cannot scale, you do not have the capital to expand your technology base, you do not have the capital to bring on a different service line and have the runway that's required for implementation before you see profit. If you find yourself as an agency that you just cannot attract the talent, that you're being outbid, outgunned in terms of talent by other competing organizations, you're unable to meet deadlines for current contractual expectations. If you see your revenues, and I certainly have seen this with agencies over the past period, over the pandemic period since 2019, is just having loss of revenue in terms of service delivery. I know that the federal funds help to kind of keep people whole, but if you strip that out and just look at decreases in fee-for-service unit costs compared to overhead, many agencies are seeing decrease in those margins and are actually losing. Certainly workforce turnover and burnout has had a significant impact across our industry. And if you're seeing that and not being able to regroup and bring new people in and be competitive in your salaries, if you're seeing that you have a number of errors just because of human error, like you don't have enough efficiency in your technology and your administrative functions to reduce human error, antiquated processes. And I think the last one, which I often see in small agencies particularly, is what I call bottlenecks. And that's where you only have one individual. If you only have one individual who can, for example, oversee your value-based contracts, and if that person leaves or if they even take vacation, you're kind of stuck in terms of your ability to move forward with it. That might be a reason to think about a merger and acquisition and or a partnership of some type. Karen will certainly speak to some of these reasons why mergers and acquisitions often fail. And just kind of run through them. Insufficient planning is certainly one. I know in working with Cornerstone in Southern Maryland, we've been working actually this entire calendar year in thinking about all of the things that need to happen, putting together a cross-matrixed implementation team and implementation plan. And another big one is ignoring politics. If you're not thinking about not only your external stakeholders and any politics at your board level or higher level, as well as all the way down to your water cooler politics. What are people saying on the ground and how are they experiencing this business change? You can be undermined by sabotage, misunderstanding, miscommunication, misinformation. If you do not have experience in collaboration and negotiation, Karen, I think we'll speak to this. We were talking before we got to the top of the hour about just working with the multiple vendors. You have multiple contracts on each side of the partnership, and how do you bring them together for efficiency as well as cost savings, and your ability to collaborate and negotiate with all of your partners through this can not only create administrative headaches and time issues, but maybe not be in your best interest at the end of the day. Thinking about, as you think about, you might want to venture out into acquiring or being acquired, considering a range of partners, not just the first person who, calls you up. You know, my experience when I was CMT CEO that Brandon mentioned in the bio, eventually that company was acquired by Relias. But I had had about 18 months of experience in terms of having many people approach and be interested in the company. It gave me an opportunity to really to understand what I was looking for in a partner and to understand what my value was in that value equation. Lack of clarity on shared goals and vision, that's a huge one, that if you're not kind of coming into the partnership with your eyes wide open in terms of what you're hoping to obtain from that, you can, again, be off, not only during the implementation period, but post the merger acquisition. It can just feel very disappointing to people, and you have a loss of staff and a loss of synergy. Taking too long and poor implementation is another huge one. You don't want your decision making or your implementation process to go on forever, again, because you lose your momentum, you lose your vision, you lose why did you start this to begin with. And so you really want to stay on a cadence and drive toward a go live date, and not be stuck in forever decision making mode or forever implementation mode. So that's just kind of the highlights there, and to kind of reframe that list in a different perspective would be to say these are the kinds of questions that you want to ask yourself. You know, first, why would you even be thinking about a merger, acquisition, or affiliation? Where does it fit in your growth strategy? And you know, understanding that a merger and an acquisition, they're different in legally in terms of what you're thinking about. A merger is when two companies come together and they create a whole new company. The old companies, tax ID, they disappear. The names of the companies go away. The legal status goes away. A new company emerges with a new branding, a new name, a new tax ID. So that has a particular strategy to it if you choose to do merger. Acquisition is when one company actually acquires the other company, and that company that is acquired becomes, and in this example, Southern Maryland is being acquired by Cornerstone, and all of the branding will be Cornerstone. And so that's a different kind of strategy and different business value than a merger. And then there's other affiliations, you know, clinically integrated networks, integrated independent practice associations where you're more loosely joined together. There's no change in your corporate structure, but you come together to leverage either technology, people, contracting power, growth, and each of these have a different strategy. So really starting with where are you trying to go? What are you trying to do? And which of these, if any, fit within your portfolio? Really, really important as you consider your partnerships to think about your organizational culture. You know, the trust between the two organizations must be extremely high. You can't bring two organizations together where the cultures are just very different fit, and that takes time to get to know each other and understand how you operate. And at the end of the day, if you're not engaging in this activity for some business advantage, whether that is to grow your revenue, you know, stave off your competitors, or just simply sustain yourself because you're too small to continue year after year at your level, then you don't really need to be thinking about it. You don't need to put your hat in that field. But certainly from a value-based reimbursement standpoint, you know, in order to, if you're going to change your revenue structure to a value-based reimbursement, whether it's bonus, whether you pay for performance, case rate, you know, doing something around care coordination, you have to have enough volume in order to make the investment in the stand-up to get ready for it worthwhile. And sometimes small entities can simply not get enough volume in terms of the referral process under that value-based arrangement, you know, to make it worthwhile. It comes to, you know, a few $1,000s, but you've had to invest, you know, $25,000 as an example. You have to know what those business equations are in order to think about standing yourself up for value-based contracting. I think this is where I'm going to pass it over to Karen to talk to us about Cornerstone in Southern Maryland. I don't know if any comments you have or anything that has come through on chat before we go forward.
Good afternoon, everybody. I don't see anything on chat, so I will say that Carrie was really sorry not to be able to join us today. I think today is indicative of what the last 30 days prior to our go live date have been looking like. I compared it to passing the hot potato back and forth. We've had to really do a lot of shifting of priorities in order to get where we're trying to go by January 1. So this map kind of gives you an idea of our service area. Southern Maryland Community Network serves the Calvert, St. Mary's, and Charles County area in Maryland, and then Montgomery County, Cornerstone Montgomery serves Montgomery County. They have several locations within Montgomery County, and together we sort of surround Washington, D.C. minus Prince George's County. So that gives you an idea of what we look like put together. So one of the decisions that a lot of people have asked about is, how do you know whether or not it is time to consider a merger? And I will say that coming into this merger process, Southern Maryland Community Network had a merger or affiliation in our strategic plan for about 7 years. So we had been seriously looking for a partner. And Cornerstone Montgomery likewise had it in their strategic plan. We had approached several partners and had some different experiences, which I can talk about later. But some of the drivers were related to strategy, looking at marketplace changes and meeting the needs for care in our regions. Looking at value-based contract capacity and whether or not at the size of Southern Maryland Community Network, we would really have the infrastructure for value-based contracts. And then Cornerstone looking at whether or not they served a sufficient client base to be attractive for value-based payments contracts. And of course, consideration of expansion, whether for Southern Maryland Community Network, we were interested in clinical expansion. We do not have a clinic, and we were interested in a partner that had a clinic. We were interested in a partner who was CCBHC ready. So those were two really important things to us. Cornerstone was interested in regional expansion since all of their services are in Montgomery County. Then, of course, there had been more recent drivers. COVID-19 brought us program stressors, reduced services in some of our key programs. Cornerstone has the same issue in some of the key programs. And then inability to meet demand in other programs where the demand has outstripped the workforce, and the COVID-19 related workforce problems have made it difficult to staff up in some of those programs. And then in Maryland, we have a Medicaid carve-out, and so the Medicaid claims are paid through an administrative services organization that took over in January of 20. And in January of 20, they had a lot of difficulty getting their processes in place, getting their software working correctly. And so as a consequence of that, we're unable to pay claims in real time for about 8 months. And that caused the ASO to have to distribute estimated payments, and still here we are in late 2022 reconciling all of the claims and payments from 2020. So we had some cash flow disruption, we had some just really a lot of claims work to do that was very much outside of normal business process here in Maryland. So both agencies were facing that. And then finally, synergy. We both were interested in adding to the talent, particularly in our administrative and clinical teams. We're interested in administrative savings. And we're understanding more and more that that will be over time because it certainly won't be in the first year. And then managing workforce shortages. So these were kind of the gist of the drivers. So the reasons why, Carol really has talked a lot about these kinds of things, but I'll just go through them again for our particular case. We wanted a geographical advantage, leverage for contracting by being a larger agency and serving more covered lives. We are interested in nonprofits as retaining, we would like to retain our independence. There's been a lot of merger activity here in Maryland with large hospital systems, and we'd like to maintain our independence and be an alternative for agencies that likewise did not want to join large hospital systems. We're interested in our mission integrity, sharing our strengths. I mentioned CCBHC. Maryland has not adopted CCBHCs yet as a funding model, but Cornerstone Montgomery happens to be in their either second or third SAMHSA CCBHC expansion grant. And so they've built a lot of the components, the integrated care, and Southern Maryland Community Network wants to do the same for the southern counties. There is no provider in the southern region who offers that full continuum of care. Of course, we're interested in financial and operational sustainability. We both watched our margins shrink quite a bit over between the issues of COVID and the issues of the ASO that I mentioned. We also are interested in diversifying our income and thinking about reducing our reliance on Medicaid over time. Cornerstone Montgomery offers a training program for outside agencies and practitioners. So they have a menu of options, mental health first aid, and some other evidence-based practices that they teach. And so the interest in growing that is also leveraging some of the expertise on Southern Maryland Community Network staff to help continue that. We're also interested in potentially developing a social enterprise as a diversification strategy. And finally, Southern Maryland Community Network is in a more rural area where Cornerstone is in a more urban area, and this widens our availability in terms of grants that are meant for certain specific types of regions. Next slide.
Hey, Karen, I was trying to come off before we move on. I had this was a fascinating slide for me. The training program and the social franchise. If I'm hearing you correctly, from a business strategy, those are revenue generating. That training program is revenue generating for Cornerstone, and this is an opportunity through this expanded service network, if you will, to grow that even further. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. And what's interesting is when we initially started working on whether or not we were going to merge and start having the initial conversations, an RFP came out in my region looking for a trainer for something in one of the counties that we operate in, which I sent to Carrie, and she immediately took advantage of, and Cornerstone was able to provide some trainings down here in Southern Maryland. This is all pre-merger. So, you know, I think there's been some synergy from really the very beginning, but yes, that the effort there is revenue generation.
That's I'm bringing that up for the audience, that if you also are living in a region where value-based contracting has not yet moved forward in a significant way, but you're looking in terms of how you might grow your revenue, I think both of these bullets here are, from my perspective, really innovative in terms of how you think outside the box a bit. Elaborate a little bit on the social enterprise, what that means exactly. Put a little, sort of practicality on it for people like me who are naive in the audience.
So this is something that is a pet project, if you will, that Cornerstone was thinking about. And in our initial conversations, Carrie and I started talking about the concerns with being with the fragility of these agencies being fully 85% to 90% Medicaid funded. And she brought up this idea, and then we got so excited about talking about that. We talked about that for an hour rather than talking about the merger. But this kind of spans a continuum. There are agencies, there's an agency that owns its own EHR company. There are agencies that operate and run, let's say, a Starbucks or McDonald's franchise. There are agencies that have contracts to clean hotels, and they do that for a social enterprise. So social enterprise really runs the gamut. And so I think a lot of this decision and will be partly about revenue, but also about marketing and development and considering how that enterprise matches our values. So this is very much a future
Very
effort.
interesting. Yeah. And is it also tied at all to employment or supported employment for people served?
Yeah.
Potentially?
Yep. The hope would be to offer competitive employment for those people that are interested. But then really having those any sort of enterprise be fully integrated. So bringing in employees from outside, but also client employees. And so, we really want this to be a vehicle for a number of different things, for visibility, for employment, for revenue.
Well, thank you for sharing. That was helpful. Those particular bullets caught my attention. All right, I have moved to your next slide.
Sure. So we did want to address really quickly the how we feel that merging may help us with our value-based payment contract readiness. Of course, serving a wider geographic area makes us more efficient to contract with, and more persons served would allow us to demonstrate more value. In the outcome area, we each have experience with evidence-based practices, and the hope is to kind of like share those best practices and continue to improve both of our outcomes. We hope that coming together will increase our capacity to train our staff for consistency and results. We both are very fortunate to have a lot of experienced leadership in the mid and upper management roles. We're hoping for some savings. Some of it's really minor, things like reducing our cost per user on our technology platforms, Relias being one of them, coincidentally enough, and also our EHR. We hope to improve the use of provider capacity via telehealth. So Cornerstone has some doc hour capacity that we could certainly utilize down here for med management, and then increasing the continuum of care without building it from scratch as part of that savings equation. And then finally, the risk management, thinking about how having the larger organization and more resources will help us better manage our financial risk. improving our resources for performance management, including data and quality outcomes. There's a tremendous amount of data to manage, and both of us were running business intelligence platforms and other things, and so the hope is to really bring those resources together and come together to produce those better outcomes and manage our risks. Next slide. So I'm sure if you've sat in on any merger talk, you've heard merger compared to the process of dating to engagement and marriage. So, we're sitting here at this point in the, last couple of weeks before the wedding, and, trying on the wedding dress, making sure it fits. And we began really initially about a year ago with meeting together. And this is where I want to talk a little bit about Southern Maryland Community Network's previous experience and how that came to bear on what that initial conversation with Carrie sounded like. We had made a couple of different previous attempts. We had attempted merger with a substance use agency, thinking that that would improve our continuum of care if we could offer the mental health side and then they could offer the substance use side. And it just really wasn't a good fit because the other agency was in such severe financial distress that we were not able to absorb that cost. So that wasn't going to work for us. Later, we tried merger with a similar agency in another county. And while the executive director and I think we're on the same page and felt that it would have been a good fit and felt good about it, the board of directors really wasn't on board with it and wasn't in alignment with the strategy of moving outside the county region that organization operated in. So it ended up not being a good fit. And in that, I want to go back to what Carol was saying about taking too long. That was a case where it took too long. We worked at it for about 2 years and really had to ponder in the second year whether there was any point in continuing conversations. And then at the point at which I decided that it really wasn't going to ever come to anything, I reached out to my state association and just had a conversation about potential partners, and someone suggested Cornerstone Montgomery, and I did already know Cornerstone Montgomery. I'd served on the board of directors at the Community Association of Maryland, Community Behavioral Health Association of Maryland with Carrie in the past. So reached out to her to have these conversations. We talked about our strategic plans. We talked about mission, programs, strategy. And what happened was immediately we realized we had that alignment and that synergy, similar values, similar goals going forward, and we're able to secure a letter of inquiry from our boards and to allow us to keep talking. We formed a board task force with 3 members of her board and 3 members of mine, and each of us to discuss things as we went. But we didn't have them meet unless we had something to present or a decision to be made. So we really tried to pay attention to their time and not have unnecessary meetings. We started exchanging documents, our financial statements, our audits, contracts, all of those kinds of things. And we were making such good progress there that it became time to engage consultants. We engaged Open Minds to help us. We engaged attorneys. We engaged financial assistance for our financial due diligence from an accounting firm. And we started working on our stakeholder communications. We started our stakeholder communications very early in the process. Some folks questioned whether we did that too soon. I'm very glad that we did, because I think it helped us make forward progress really quickly and to deal with any questions or concerns early on in the process. And we very early on also began reciprocal visits to each other's agencies. So we've been at each other's offices at least once a month, every month, so that we became familiar to each other's staffs. And we started a joint newsletter early on that introduced staff to one another. So we were kind of crossing silos from the very beginning. And then we started putting together the integration plan with the help of Open Minds. So we're really at this point now where we've had a resolution approving the merger by both boards. We have been working on transitioning of contracts, licenses, loans, working with our benefits companies, and really getting all of the final pieces in place. And we anticipate that the first year is going to be a lot more of the same as far as getting those integration plans actually operational. So human resources, IT, facilities, our EHR, revising policies and procedures, working with our accrediting body, and doing some of those other things. So we're quickly converging on our go live date, and as we are doing so, we've become much more familiar with some of the pitfalls of this process and some of the things that may not go as anticipated right out of the gate. But we're working through it, and this is where I think some of the things that Carol brought up about trust are really important. It's been really wonderful to work with an organization that everyone's very professional, and we've been able to really exchange information, work through barriers, work through roadblocks very successfully. And I would say that certainly, well, there is a slide about some key learnings, so I'll wait for that to talk about some of those things. But we really tried to make sure that communication was something that we really focused on. So next slide, Carol. You were right on the money.
Was I doing right? Okay, good, good.
So Cornerstone Montgomery's been in operation for 50 years. And at the time that we started working on this together, they were at $28 million and 350 employees, over 3,000 clients. They were CARF accredited, own quite a bit of property, lease quite a bit of property, and they have in-house IT, facilities, billing, and human resources. Southern Maryland Community Network has been in operation for 40 years. We are at $6.4 million with 75 employees, about 500 clients, operating in the 3-county exurban region. We also own property. We have 5 houses and a commercial building. We lease a house and a couple of other commercial spaces. We, however, had increasingly outsourced some of our administrative activities. We had outsourced IT, outsourced billing, and outsourced HR. So some of the things about putting the two agencies together kind of considered the fact that we will no longer have to outsource some of those things. And then fortunately, we do share some similar technology. We are both utilize the same EHR vendor, the same learning management system. We have Southern Maryland Community Network has an older version of Sage Accounting. Cornerstone has the newer, so those are not dissimilar. So we had a lot of kind of things that were the same. We happened to share the same benefits broker for the majority of our benefits as well. So while the selections that we made underneath the benefits were different, we do have the same broker, which has been very helpful in putting those things together. Next slide. So this will be what we look like together, and it's really exciting when you look at it together, because I heard at the last Open Minds conference that I attended, there was an agency that described their experience in terms of their collective experience. So if you look at us collectively, we have over 90 years of experience serving these populations and providing these programs. We will be able to do that across a 4-county area, have this wide continuum of care, serving the youth to old age in our programs, offering health home services, substance use services, case management, residential, crisis services. So huge, wide continuum of care. And so, you know, I think as much as anything, this slide is kind of spells out the why and spells out the value. If you're coming at a value-based contract, this slide looks way better than the slide with 2 entities separate. Next. So these are key learnings: transparency, communicating a lot. I've been asked by quite a few people whether there's a lot of employee concern or worries about attrition, that kind of thing. I would say that yes, we had attrition, and we had it 6 months ago. Because we were so transparent, a lot of the attrition that happened as a consequence of people being concerned about the merger happened several months ago. And interestingly, we have had application from individuals who left 6 months ago worried about the merger and are now ready to come back. And fortunately, it's people that we are really excited to have back. You want to identify advocates within the agencies and within the board of directors, because you do have to have some cheerleaders at the water cooler, within your organization, and outside your organization. There will be talk and discussion, and so there does need to be some people that are as excited as the leadership is. You need to consider what you want, not what each organization has always done. So we have differences in policies and procedures. We have differences in the way we've done things. And what's been interesting is how each of us has learned from the other already as we've been comparing and integrating those things. You want to, of course, identify any potential problems, pending litigation either agency has, any financial problems, any information silos, things like that. Those are things that will derail your success. And each of us had to kind of share the good, the bad, and the ugly in any of those areas, and not always fun. You need to plan your responses to reluctant or disengaged staff. One of the things that we did right away was create a transition email that went to both Carrie and I, so that either side staff could ask a question at any time. I think we got one, but You want to be able to also plan responses to staff who want to know how they'll be affected or if they will be affected. And you want to be honest about that. So you cannot tell people that there will be no changes. It's always a reality of these situations that things will change. Whether it's your health insurance will change, whether it's your holiday schedule will change, whether it's your position title, who you report to, all of those things are considerations, and they're important to people. And so during a time of a workforce shortage and a time when many agencies are having so much trouble hiring, it was particularly important that we do well in the way that we communicated with our staff. And I think one of the things that's been an unexpected but positive side effect is Southern Maryland Community Network had a tremendous number of openings at the time that Carrie and I started talking, and we're at this point down to just a handful of unfilled positions. So I think that's been a fortunate side effect of being very honest and transparent. We've had people come in, we've told them about the merger during their interview so that they know that that's what's happening. You want to plan for any issues related to capacity. There's a lot of work to do. And so you may need extra clerical help. You may need extra accounting help. You may need extra help doing any number of things. If you're already thin in one of the areas that is going to be key in a merger, in your human resources capacity or some other things, you're going to need to account for that. And you may have to be prepared to spend some money getting some outside help. Timelines, you definitely want to plan early. There's a lot to consider with benefits, insurance, MA, NPI, licenses, accreditation, all of those things require time, and there's compliance to consider in many of the benefits notifications or other things that you have to think about. So as we're coming into these last couple of weeks, everything is very time urgent. So just know that that's going to be part of that process. And so suggested timeline, I think what we have, if we were to do this over again, I think we feel like we could do it a little bit more quickly as far as the beginning parts. But what we would want to do is probably allow a little bit more time in the area of new licenses, NPIs, those kinds of things. And of course, now we're, rapidly approaching the fun part, which involves celebration and press and all of that good stuff. So this is the place where we are at this point in time with really finishing up the licenses, the NPIs, the MA numbers. We've developed a pro forma budget that has been passed by our joint board. And so all of those things are coming right along. But I think that my guess is it's one of those things that probably varies depending upon who your merger partner is. It probably looks different each time. We've been really, really fortunate to have great professionalism behind getting all of this stuff out to all of the various entities. Some of the things I would prepare you for, though, as well, as the smaller organization in the process, if you have merger or affiliation as a strategy, when you re-up your vendor contracts, think very carefully about maybe having merger as a clause in your vendor contracts or consider the length of your vendor contracts, because that has turned out to be a costly endeavor, ending vendor contracts sooner than planned.
That's an important point. We have a few minutes left for questions. Thank you, Karen. It was so helpful. I will open up the chat and let folks pop in. And while we're looking, just a couple of points that you made to reiterate, again, because I've been working with you through the implementation process. I know one of the questions that often comes up when you put together your integration team or your implementation team is, well, who should I put on the team? Because, you know, the senior people, they're all so busy, like they can't commit to another project.
Yeah.
And the word of advice and recommendation I always have is put your best people on that team. Because, you know, even though they are all busy, the fact of the matter is, if you have less experienced staff on that team, it ends up taking longer. It ends up being probably more time onerous for the senior person, because the junior person's kind of continues to come to them to seek guidance and help about where to go. You will move faster. You want them engaged in the process early on, and hopefully be enthusiastic and be an opinion leader. So I really encourage you, if you're in this mode of thinking about put your best and your brightest, because you do want your implementation to run smoothly and quickly. And so it takes people with lots of skill set and multitasking to be able to do that. I think let me go back, there was another thing that you mentioned. Oh, the other thing that struck me, Karen, again, in learning with you all in this process is, especially on the timeline, is you as the agency have your own timeline, but then you're dealing with agencies who might have a different timeline. And
Right.
so, to your point of start early, it's because if you've scheduled to, you know, I'm making this up, but let's say you've been scheduled to start talking about benefit consolidation 90 days out, and then you find out from your benefits broker that you actually needed 6 months, right? So it's like,
yeah,
start, because they're not necessarily on your time frame. They're on their own time frame, and so just make sure that you're starting in advance. And knowing where you might have crunch, just because they're not going to be able to complete the tasks within the time frame that you have.
That's true. And the other piece has been that we've also had to strongly impress upon some of our vendors where we're spending a lot of agency resources, that is the area where they are subject matter experts, and we need their expertise and their help.
Yes.
And so, we've had to make sure that we had very strong conversations in some places saying, we need guidance here, we need suggestions, we need options, option A, B, C. And so, really getting very granular sometimes is helpful with some of those things.
Yes.
And
knowing exactly what you need from them and being clear that they are the expert and therefore you need their guidance.
Right.
Yeah.
And to your point, having senior people, your best people on the team, even if it's not your senior people, but your best people on the integration
Correct.
team,
Yeah.
very important, because you need people who feel empowered to say, I think we should do this, not that, or I think that it's going to take until X date to accomplish moving the training information from one platform to the other, or whatever the case may be, because the executive directors or the CEOs cannot be the single point of failure in each of those areas.
Exactly. Such a great comment. It's not senior people, it's best people, and it is a cross matrixed hierarchical team, because they're the ones who know really at the end of the day what needs to be done to have it all run.
Right.
And Well, thank you, Karen. We are at the top of our hour, and just remind the audience, you will receive the slides. They'll be out on the Open Minds website tomorrow. I appreciate your attendance, Karen. Appreciate you and Carrie sharing your story and really informing the community. And you know, this is a shared learning opportunity, so really appreciate your participation.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you, Karen, and thank you, Carol, both. Fantastic presentation. To everyone in the audience, thank you for joining us for today's web forum. I wanted to remind everyone, like Carol said, that the slides and recording will be available tomorrow on the Open Minds website. Also, the full Circle Elite Executive Roundtable series is available on demand as part of the extensive Open Minds library and can also be found from the Open Minds YouTube channel as well. Please join us for our next roundtable, which will be an executive Circle Elite Roundtable on Thursday, December 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. The topic will be Centers of Excellence in Addiction Treatment, the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation Case Study. During this 1 hour live presentation, Kim Albers, Director of Recovery Management, and Jennifer Duncan Sanfords, National and Strategic Account Director for the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation, will share their organization's successful response to substance abuse in the workplace and how Centers of Excellence and focused aftercare positively impact not only the employees, but the employer as well. Attendees will hear how Hazelden Betty Ford is dedicated to responding to the escalating need for programs specific to treating substance use disorder. They will hear how Hazelden Betty Ford actively partners with employers and payers to provide quality ethical care paired with a longer engagement in the post-treatment recovery path for substance use disorder. For a full list of our upcoming roundtables or to register for the December 15th event, please visit the Executive Roundtables page under the Events tab at www.openminds.com. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great day.